Jonas Red hadn't heard another man's voice in 4 days. The desert had gone quiet, save for the whisper of wind across dry brush and the occasional crack of thunder overhead. His tent flapped in the gusts like an old war flag, stitched from canvas and soot perched beside a dying fire. He was halfway between sleep and memory, the kind where rifle fire echoes behind closed eyes. When the hoofbeats came, fast, hard, too many. He shot upright, fingers already curling around the stock of the Henry rifle beside his bedroll. Outside, the storm growled low and the wind howled across the open flat like a warning. The sound of hooves stopped short, then came the crash. A figure burst through the flap, half falling, half thrown by the desert itself. Jonas aimed square at the intruder's chest, finger tightening on the trigger. But he didn't fire. It was a woman, an Apache. She slammed into him with dead weight, her breath hot and ragged. Blood soaked her right side, her face was smeared with sand and bruises, and her eyes, just for a flicker, met his. "Child," she gasped, then collapsed. Jonas froze for a second, heart hammering against his ribs, before kicking off the bedroll and laying her gently onto the wooden plank floor. Lightning lit the inside of the tent like a lantern flare, revealing the wound, a deep gash across her ribs, still leaking dark blood. "God damn it," he muttered, setting the rifle aside. He fetched a cloth and his rusted tin basin, filled it from the rain barrel just outside. The wind nearly yanked the tent flaps clean off their ties, and in that moment he looked around the canyon floor, dark and wide, broken only by his lonely camp and the distant shapes of desert boulders. Thunder boomed again. When he returned, she hadn't moved. He crouched beside her, lifted the shirt, careful not to touch her skin more than needed, and began cleaning the wound. That's when he saw it. Tucked beneath her belt, barely visible in the lantern light, was a metal token, round, dirt-smeared, but unmistakable, a U.S. cavalry insignia. Jonas stared. The damn thing looked ripped clean off a uniform. His hand hovered over it. The gash had likely been made by a saber or a bayonet. But if she had that badge, "You one of 'em?" he whispered to himself. "Or did you kill one?" The fire popped behind him. Wind moaned through the canyon like a wailing spirit. He reached toward the badge, her eyes shot open, in a blur. Her hand seized the knife from her boot, and in the space of a breath, it was pressed to his throat. He didn't flinch. Her voice was cracked and hoarse, but clear as glass. "If you touch me again," she said, "I'll bleed you next." They stayed frozen. The knife didn't shake. Neither did his hand on the cloth. "You're hurt," he said evenly. "I ain't trying anything. I don't care." He nodded slightly. "Then kill me quick or let me finish." She didn't move the blade, just stared into him, eyes full of grit and fire. Then slowly she let the knife drop. Jonas returned to cleaning the wound, wordless. He tore a strip from an old shirt and wrapped her ribs. She never looked away from him. "Name's Jonas," he offered. Silence, then soft, "Nietzsche." He nodded. Just as he tied off the last knot, light flickered outside. Torchlight, moving along the ridgeline. Jonas blew out the lantern. He crawled to the flap and peeked through the slit. 4 riders, maybe 5. Lanterns swinging. Cavalry. Their shadows stretched long and lean across the rocks, their horses snorting against the wind. They were looking for someone. Jonas turned back. Nietzsche was already pulling herself up, face pale but focused. She reached for her belt, wincing hard. "I can't outrun them," she said. "No," he agreed. "You can't." Her eyes locked on his. "Then you decide, cowboy. Them or me." The floorboards beneath the cot creaked as Jonas shifted the planks back into place, covering Nietzsche in darkness just seconds before the sound of boots and hooves reached his tent. Rain drummed steady on the canvas overhead, and the glow of torches flickered through the seams. Jonas grabbed the whiskey bottle, took a swig, and sat at the table like he'd been doing nothing at all. A voice barked outside. Jonas read. "Step out!" He rose slow, unarmed, arms raised. "Evenin', Sergeant." 3 cavalrymen stood in the torchlight, coats soaked, rifles slung, but ready. In the middle stood Sergeant Cade Mercer, square jaw, hard eyes, and a mouth that looked like it forgot how to smile. He didn't wait for pleasantries, looking for a runner. Apache woman, armed, wounded. Jonas gave a slow shake of the head. "Ain't seen a soul but buzzards in days." Mercer stepped inside without asking, eyes scanning the space. He kicked at the firewood pile, lifted the edge of the bedroll. One of the scouts poked around outside. You got fresh blood on that shirt, Mercer said. Cut myself sharpening a blade. He didn't buy it. His eyes landed on the basin, red-tinged water. Then the table. 2 tin cups. You drink alone now, Red? Jonas didn't blink. One's for the dead. Ain't much company these days. Mercer walked closer, close enough for Jonas to smell the sweat under his oilskin coat. He picked up the cup, sniffed it, then set it down like he'd just checked a trap. You still mad at us, Red Wolf? He asked, low and sharp. Jonas's jaw tightened. I'm mad at myself. Mercer's smile was brief and cold. Then pour us a drink. Jonas obliged, bottle steady in his hand. They drank in silence. Mercer's eyes wandered, but only briefly. Then he turned to go. You see anything? Mercer stepped out into the rain. You whistle. The horses rode off into the dark, hoofbeats fading behind the thunder. Jonas waited a full minute before dropping to his knees and pulling the planks back up. Nietzsche gasped for air, face slick with sweat and dust. He led them? Jonas nodded. Sergeant Cade Mercer. Mean bastard. Didn't like Indians even when he was paid to. She sat up slow, rubbing her wrists. He killed my brother. Jonas looked her over. That badge. Was it his? Her gaze didn't waver. My brother died wearing it. The same day your old unit came through Red Mesa. Silence. Jonas stepped back like she'd struck him. The name was a knife to the ribs. I wasn't there for Red Mesa, he muttered. But you scouted the pass, led them through. His hands dropped to his sides. The fire flickered low. In his mind, he could still see the map he'd drawn years ago. The shortcut, the elevation marks, the ridgeline he thought was empty. They called you the Red Wolf, she said. The one who howled for coin. Jonas looked away. I don't howl anymore. Nietzsche's voice dropped to a whisper. I came here to find the man who helped kill my family. He turned back to her. Then why haven't you slit my throat yet? I need you to finish what you started. Her eyes were sharp, burning. You owe that much to the dead. The sky burned pale orange as dawn broke over the desert, casting long shadows across the jagged ridgelines. The storm had passed, but the air still clung heavy with moisture. The scent of wet dust thick in Jonas's nostrils. He stood outside the tent, boots pressed to churned mud, studying the ground. Fresh tracks. Hoof prints too many to count cleanly, but deep and pointed in one direction, then back again. They'd circled during the night. He scanned the ridge. No movement. Still, his gut prickled with that old sense, the one that kept him breathing through 2 tours riding with men who didn't always return. Inside the tent, Nietzsche shivered beneath a wool blanket, her skin slick with sweat. The fever had come fast, climbing behind her wound like a rattler behind rocks. She mumbled in her tongue, words tangled and soft, a name spoken more than once. Chayton. Jonas didn't ask who it was. He boiled water, crushed the last of his willow bark. Not near enough. She needed real medicine. Laudanum, maybe. Bandage powder if he could get it. That meant the post. He hesitated. She was too weak to run, but if Mercer doubled back... Jonas glanced at the rifle, then at her. Guilt hung around his neck like a noose. He had blood on his past and maybe some on hers, but the way she looked at him last night, part fury, part plea, kept him from walking away. By mid-morning, he rode out, rifle across his lap, coat pulled low. The sun crept higher with every mile. He reached the trading post by noon, a squat wooden building leaning slightly westward from years of sand-blown wind, a corral beside it, and the glint of 3 cavalry horses tied up front. Jonas cursed under his breath. He dismounted in the shadows behind a rocky outcrop and moved on foot. Peered through the front window. Inside, Cade Mercer stood with a whiskey glass in hand, speaking low to the barkeep, a wiry man with a face like worn boot leather. Apache girl, Mercer said, might be carrying a stolen map, hand-drawn by a dead scout. We think she's heading for Skeleton Bluff. Jonas felt his chest tighten. Skeleton's sacred land, the barkeep muttered. You mining it now? Soon, Mercer said. Once the last witnesses are cleared, Jonas didn't wait to hear more. He crept back to his horse, every muscle on edge. He rode hard the moment he hit the open stretch, thunder in his chest louder than last night's storm. By the time he reached camp, the sun was dipping low, shadows long again. Nietzsche was still asleep, breathing shallow but steady. He went to his saddlebags to retrieve the pouch of herbs he did manage to buy. There, tucked under the flap, wrapped in a torn cloth he hadn't noticed before, was a folded piece of yellowed hide. He opened it, A map. Lines scratched in charcoal. Canyon ridges. Burial markers. The words Red Mesa Witness Ground scrawled in broken English. He looked toward the tent. Nige had never told him she carried it. The fire was low when Jonas returned, casting soft flickers across the tent walls. The desert wind had stilled, replaced by a hushed silence that pressed in like a held breath. He stepped inside, the map folded tight in his hand. Nige lay on the cot, eyes open now, fevered but clear. He didn't waste time. "You carrying this the whole time?" he asked, holding up the hide. Her gaze didn't move. "You looked?" "I did." A long beat passed. "My brother drew it," she said quietly. "Chayton. He was made to ride for the cavalry. Said if he carried a rifle, maybe he could protect our people from the inside." Jonas sat down across from her. The map trembled slightly in his fingers. "So what happened?" She blinked slow, like it hurt to remember. "He sent letters. Said they were scouting Skeleton Bluff. Found bones. Small ones. Apache graves, maybe a dozen. Cade Mercer didn't report them. Just laughed. Next day, the unit moved in heavy, guns ready. When it was done, the ground was full of smoke. Chayton wasn't with them when they came back. Jonas didn't move. The words soaked into the space between them. Next week, she went on. They said he deserted, but I got this. She reached to the pouch tied at her side, pulled out a ragged scrap of parchment. Chayton's writing, rough, barely legible. The final line read, "If I vanish, the truth is buried at Skeleton Bluff. Let them see it." Jonas stared at the page, then the map, then her. He said if the whites saw it, Nige whispered, maybe they'd stop the digging. Jonas exhaled slow. They won't. Her eyes narrowed. Then why are you still here? He looked at her, really looked. This girl who had bled in his arms, who had nearly killed him, who had every right to. Maybe, he said, we can make him choke on the truth instead. She watched him. For a moment he thought she'd laugh. Instead, she nodded once. We ride at dawn, she said. Jonas folded the map and tucked it into his coat. The fire hissed low. In the stillness, they both knew what was waiting at Skeleton Bluff. Not gold, not salvation, but bones, and truth sharp enough to cut a man's name in stone. The ride to Skeleton Bluff was long and dry, with silence trailing behind them like a second shadow. The sun burned a pale white through a sky scrubbed clean of clouds, and the land below stretched endless, rocks broken like bones, thorn brush clawing up through dust. Jonas hadn't been there in years. Not since the cavalry camped in the hills, calling it empty land, calling it free. But as they rounded the ridge and the canyon opened below, it didn't feel empty. It felt haunted. Skeleton Bluff wasn't named for show. Jagged outcroppings curved like teeth into the sky, and the wind didn't howl so much as whisper. Soft, mournful, like voices had been buried, but never quieted. They dismounted in the shadows. Nige led silent as breath. At the edge of a dry wash, she knelt. From a pouch tied to her belt, she pulled a small bundle wrapped in faded cloth. Inside, a pendant carved from antler, a strip of blue cloth, and a patch of faded cavalry wool, her brother's tokens. Jonas stood back, hat removed, heart heavy. Nige whispered words to the ground, words he didn't understand. She touched the earth gently, laid the items down, and pressed her palm into the soil. Her fingers trembled, but her back stayed straight. Then, without speaking, she rose and nodded once. Jonas scanned the terrain. There were no markers, no crosses. But he knew what to look for. Subtle mounds, stones set unnaturally, patterns that didn't belong to wind or weather. He started marking spots with chalk. 1, then another, 4, 7, 11. Most were shallow. The earth gave too easy. In the third, he found a round button, dulled by time. The fourth gave up a rusted slug, .58 caliber. Standard cavalry issue. By the 12th, his gut had twisted into a knot. Some of these were kids, he said, voice low. Nige stood behind him, eyes hard. We said there were no more warriors. They came anyway. Jonas sketched the field into a battered notebook, marked the pattern. Every grave, every bullet, every bone that spoke louder than the men who tried to silence them. He didn't hear the hoofbeats until it was too late. Gunfire cracked. Dirt kicked up at his feet. Nige shouted, "Down!" They dove behind a slab of rock as bullets shredded the air. Jonas peeked up and spotted Cade Mercer on horseback, flanked by 3 men, rifles raised. Mercer's voice rang out thick with hatred. "Red Wolf!" Still howling for savages. Jonas gritted his teeth, blood roaring in his ears. "No!" he shouted back. "Just truth," gunshots answered. Rock splinters stung his face. One shot caught him in the shoulder, spun him backward. Nightshade pulled him behind cover, breath tight. "Jonas!" "Just a graze," he lied, eyes already dimming. "You got the map?" She nodded. He handed her the notebook, blood soaking through the corner. "Get it out." "What about you?" Jonas looked to the ridge. They were closing in. "I'll buy time." She hesitated a second too long. "Go." She bolted through the rocks, hugging shadows. Gunfire followed her, but she moved like a spirit, vanishing between stone pillars. Jonas rolled onto his side, rifle cocked with one hand, blood dripping from the other. Last thing he saw was Mercer walking slow, smirking, as the butt of a rifle came down toward his skull. Jonas came to with a boot pressing against his ribs and blood dried thick across his face. His arms were tied, wrists aching, shirt soaked through with dust and sweat. They dragged him into Fort Anders like a sack of coal, soldiers barely hiding their smirks as they shoved him through the command tent. Colonel Beauregard didn't look up right away. Seated behind a table of maps and dispatches, he was an older man with silver whiskers and eyes like chipped glass. He glanced once at Jonas, then at Mercer, standing stiff as a post to his right. "What's this?" the colonel asked flatly. Jonas read. Mercer said, "Harboring a fugitive Apache, interfering with military operations, possibly treason." Jonas spat blood to the floor. "You forgot scouting the truth." Mercer stepped forward. "He's protecting a known killer and spying on classified sites. We caught him with this." He tossed the rolled-up hide map onto the table. Beauregard unrolled it. His eyes flicked over the lines. "And?" "That's Skeleton Bluff, unclaimed mineral zone. Potential gold veins. He says it's an Apache graveyard." Beauregard looked to Jonas. "Is that true?" Jonas stood as straight as his body would allow. "Not potential. Confirmed. I counted the markers. 11 visible. The map marks 50. Most shallow. Some with bullets. One with a cavalry button." Beauregard frowned. "You're a civilian. Why were you there?" "Because I used to ride for men like him," Jonas said, nodding toward Mercer. "And I got tired of forgetting what we buried." Beauregard's hand hovered over the map. This could be a forgery. Apache trick. Jonas reached into his coat slowly, watched closely by 2 guards, and pulled out the bloodstained notebook. "Then explain this," he said, setting it down. "Drawn by my own hand, positions, bullet calibers. One marker had a U.S. dog tag, Private Eli Hodge." Mercer stiffened. His jaw twitched. Beauregard froze mid-page. "Hodge was reported missing last year," he muttered. Jonas held his gaze. "He's buried under your future mine." The colonel said nothing, just waved a hand. "Send 2 scouts," he told a soldier by the flap. "Ride to Skeleton Bluff, verify everything." As the man left, the tent fell quiet. Mercer's face had gone pale. Jonas noticed. For the first time in a long while, the Red Wolf smiled. Just barely. The sun hadn't yet climbed above the steeple when the 2 scouts returned, their horses lathered in sweat and eyes wide with something heavier than fear. Dust still clung to their coats as they dismounted in front of Colonel Beauregard. No one spoke, but the silence hung thick and expectant around the courtyard of the town hall. The colonel stood at the head of a makeshift tribunal, his boots polished, hands behind his back. Half the town had gathered, miners, merchants, even the preacher. Word traveled fast out here, especially when blood and gold shared the same soil. "What did you find?" Beauregard asked, voice even. One of the scouts cleared his throat, eyes flicking to Mercer. "Markers, sir. 47 visible. Fresh dug, some bones exposed. Bullet wounds. One skeleton had its wrists tied with cavalry cord." Beauregard's jaw clenched. "Any identification?" 2 dog tags. One belonged to Private Eli Hodge, the other... He hesitated. "Sergeant Willards. Reported missing 6 months ago." The crowd murmured. Mercer shifted his weight, sweat beading on his brow despite the cool morning. Jonas stood off to the side, his arm in a sling, lips split but steady. He saw Nitch then emerging from the back, cloaked in dark cloth, face veiled, but her posture proud. A young man stepped beside her. Apache, fluent in both tongues. Beauregard motioned her forward. "She has a statement," the interpreter said. "Let her speak." Naiche lifted her veil, gaze cutting through the crowd like a blade. "I came here because they buried my brother under rocks," she said, voice soft but unshaken. "They said he deserted, but he died trying to tell the truth. What Cade Mercer did was not war. It was murder. He killed children to cover greed." The words echoed like gunshots in a canyon. The crowd went still. A woman gasped. One of the miners looked down at his boots. Even the preacher crossed himself. Jonas stepped forward, his voice hoarse. He unrolled the notebook again, his notes trembling slightly in the wind. "These are the names carved into some of the stones. Not warriors, families, mothers, sons," he looked at Mercer. "You called it a mine, but all you ever dug was a grave." Beauregard said nothing for a long moment. Then slowly, he reached for Mercer's coat and tore the sergeant's insignia from his shoulder. "You are hereby stripped of rank," the colonel said. "You'll be held pending court-martial in Fort Sumner." Mercer didn't speak, didn't blink, just stared ahead, as if trying to unhear everything that had just been spoken into the dust. Mercer didn't go quietly. The moment Beauregard turned to issue orders, Mercer struck. Elbowed the nearest soldier, grabbed the pistol from the holster of another, and broke into a run. The crowd scattered as he barreled through, wild-eyed, blood in his mouth and desperation on his heels. Jonas moved without thinking. Even with his arm in a sling, he dove, tackling Mercer into the dust. The pistol skittered across the ground. Fists flew. They rolled, teeth bared, boots kicking up sand. Mercer landed a blow to Jonas's temple, split skin over bone. Jonas grabbed a rock, drove it into Mercer's ribs. The younger man grunted and heaved, flipping Jonas hard. He straddled him, fists raised, then came the click. Naiche stood 10 paces away, her brother's rifle leveled steady against her shoulder. "Move," she said. Mercer froze. "You won't shoot," he spat, lip curled. She did. The crack of the rifle snapped across the courtyard. Mercer screamed and dropped, clutching his thigh. Blood poured between his fingers. Jonas rolled away, gasping, watching the pain crawl up Mercer's face like flame across dry grass. Naiche stepped forward, the rifle still warm in her hands. She looked down at the man who had buried her family beneath lies and stone. Jonas sat up slowly, breath ragged. "You could have killed him," he said. Her eyes stayed locked on Mercer. "He needs to remember." Silence fell again. The soldiers surrounded Mercer, now writhing and cursing in the dirt. Beauregard approached Naiche, holding something in his hand, a sealed envelope with the military crest pressed in wax. "This," he said, "is a written guarantee of immunity. From prosecution, from pursuit. It also states that the U.S. Army acknowledges a grave incident occurred at Skeleton Bluff, under unauthorized orders." Naiche stared at it for a long moment before taking it. Jonas watched her, the way the paper trembled slightly in her grip, not from fear, but from the weight of all it meant. No one clapped. No one cheered. But something had shifted in the air, like the desert itself had paused to listen. Mercer, bleeding and broken in the dust, met Jonas's eyes one last time, and Jonas said nothing, because sometimes justice didn't come with thunder. Sometimes it came with silence, and the memory of bones that refused to stay buried. The wind was calmer now. It rolled through the canyon like a sigh, lifting dust from the stones as Jonas hammered the last nail into a new roof beam. His camp looked less like a hiding place and more like a home. The old canvas tent was gone, replaced by timber and sweat. Smoke curled steady from the stovepipe, and the earth felt different beneath his boots. Less like penance, more like promise. He paused, wiping sweat from his brow, when he heard the hoofbeats. Light. Familiar. Naiche rode in slow, dressed not in morning black but soft desert tones. She dismounted without a word, walked up with a small bundle in her hand. "Place looks different," she said. "So do you." They stood in the stillness. Two people who had walked through fire and come out scarred but standing. She opened her hand. In her palm was the cavalry token he once wore around his neck, scrubbed clean, polished, the tarnish gone. "Found it near the fire pit," she said. "Thought you should have it back." Jonas took it, turned it over once in his fingers. The edge was chipped, the metal worn. "It don't mean what it used to," he said. She nodded. "Now it's just metal." He looked at her, and for the first time in years there was nothing clawing at his chest. No ghosts in the wind. No names buried under stone. I ain't a red wolf no more, he said softly. She smiled, not wide, but real. I work with people now, she added. Help them speak. So they're not buried in silence. He nodded, proud in a way he didn't know how to say out loud. She mounted her horse again, adjusting the reins. The sun hung low behind her, and for a moment the light caught her face like flame over water. She turned once more. If you ever come east, we'll need someone who knows the land. I just might, he said. She rode off slow, disappearing over the ridge. Jonas stood alone beneath the wide sky. He held the token once more, then placed it in the fire's ashes. The wind whispered through the canyon, not like a warning anymore, but like a song that had finally reached its last note.